The simultaneous social feedback for performance improvement in communal settings may influence the Marvel characters of a person. The innate abilities come from continuous improvement of social skills from generations. Thus, anyone wants to get an upper hand should get used to objectives planning and analysis of past experiences. There are perhaps three ways of looking at furniture. Some people see it as purely functional and useful, and don't bother themselves with aesthetics. Others see it as essential to civilized living and concern themselves with design and how the furniture will look in a room. In other words, function combined with aesthetics, and yet others see furniture as a form of art. Perhaps the most measurable benefit of the program has been the opportunity to meet in small groups, something that is difficult to arrange in such a desperate organization. Many officers would have to work together for 30 years but would not know each other's strengths and weaknesses. Our major conclusion is that the current measure needs to be revised. It no longer provides an accurate picture of the differences in the extent of economic poverty among population groups or geographic areas of the country, nor an accurate picture of trends over time.
Before the discovery of Australia, people in the Old World were convinced that all swans were white, an unassailable belief as it seemed completely confirmed by empirical evidence. The sighting of the first black swan might have been an interesting surprise for a few ornithologists, but that is not where the significance of the story lies.
Few things in the world produce such amazement as one's first glimpse of the Grand Canyon. It took around more than 2 billion years to create this vast wonder in some places. 17 miles wide, largely through the relentless force of the Colorado River, which runs 277 miles along its length and a mile beneath its towering rims. The provision of accurate and authoritative statistical information strengthens our society. It provides a basis for decisions to be made on public policy, such as determining electoral boundaries and where to locate schools and hospitals. It allows businesses to know their market, grow their business, and improve their marketing strategies by targeting their activities appropriately.
Participating regularly in physical activity has been shown to benefit an individual's health and well-being. Regular physical activity is important in reducing the risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease and stroke, obesity, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. The National Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults recommends at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, preferably every day of the week, to obtain health benefits.
Weakness in electronics. Auto and gas station sales dragged down overall retail sales last month, but excluding those three categories, retailers enjoyed healthy increases across the board, according to government figures released Wednesday. Moreover, December sales numbers were also revised higher. Teenage girls are continuing to outperform boys in English, while the gender gap in achievements in math and science has almost disappeared. The figures show that last year 80% of 14-year-old girls reached at least the expected level 5 in English, compared with 65% of boys. But in math, the girls are just 1% ahead of boys, while in science the difference is 2%. Two sisters were at a dinner party when the conversation turned to upbringing. The elder sister started to say that her parents had been very strict and that she had been rather frightened of them. Her sister, younger by 2 years, interrupted in amazement. "What are you talking about?" she said. "Our parents were very lenient." Since its inception, the UN system has been working to ensure adequate food for all through sustainable agriculture. The majority of the world's poorest people live in rural areas of developing countries. They depend on agriculture and related activities for their livelihoods. This makes them particularly vulnerable to man-made and natural influences that reduce agricultural production.
The department determines whether or not the candidate has passed the examination. In cases where an appearance for the final public oral examination would constitute a substantial financial hardship for the candidate, the Director of Graduate Studies, may recommend to the dean of the graduate school for a virtual, video-conferenced examination of the candidate.
Don't miss the very beginning of a lecture, since that is often the most valuable part, for instance, because it reviews previous lectures or outlines objectives and lecture structure. If you easily get distracted by other students, sit near the front. Investigators also compared those microbes with those living in 52 other soil samples taken from all around the planet. The park had organisms that also exist in deserts, frozen tundra, forests, rainforests, and prairies. Antarctica was the only area that had microbes that did not overlap with those found in Central Park. Only a small percentage of the park's microbes were found to be already listed in databases. The natural environment can be hazardous, and, with increased travel and leisure, people today are more likely than ever to be exposed to potentially life-threatening conditions. Although the human body can adjust to some extent, it cannot cope with poisons or prolonged exposure to extremes of environment. In the late 16th and 17th centuries, many English, French and Dutch emigrants went to North America in search of gold and silver. But they did not find it. Instead, settlers were forced to support themselves by cultivating crops that they could sell in Europe, like tobacco, indigo and rice. When countries assess their annual carbon emissions, they count up their cars and power stations, but bushfires are not included, presumably because they are deemed to be events beyond human control. In Australia, Victoria alone sees several 100,000 hectares burn each year. In both 2004 and more recently, the figure has been over 1 million hectares.
A thesis is a claim that you can argue for or against. It should be something that you can present persuasively and clearly in the scope of your paper, so keep in mind the page count. If possible, your thesis should also be somewhat original.
Introvert, or those of us with introverted tendencies, tends to recharge by spending time alone. They lose energy from being around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from other people. Extroverts actually find their energy is sapped when they spend too much time alone. They recharge by being social. These decisions are highly nuanced. Of course, we use a lot of data to inform our decisions, but we also rely very heavily on iteration, research, testing, intuition, and human empathy. Now, sometimes the designers who work on these products are called data-driven, which is a term that totally drives us bonkers. The fact is, it would be irresponsible of us not to rigorously test our designs when so many people are counting on us to get it right. Legal writing is usually less discursive than writing in other humanities subjects, and precision is more important than variety. Sentence structure should not be too complex. It is usually unnecessary to make extensive use of adjectives or adverbs, and consistency of terms is often required. Aquaculture, also known as aquafarming, is the farming of aquatic organisms such as fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and aquatic plants. Aquaculture involves cultivating freshwater and saltwater populations under controlled conditions. The semiconductor industry has been able to improve the performance of electronic systems for more than 4 decades by making ever smaller devices. However, this approach will soon encounter both scientific and technical limits, which is why the industry is exploring a number of alternative device technologies. When we recycle, used materials are converted into new products, reducing the need to consume natural resources. If used materials are not recycled, new products are made by extracting fresh, raw material from the earth, through mining and forestry. Recycling helps conserve